highway stretches endlessly before you, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the barren wilderness. The only sound is the rhythmic hum of tires on the road, broken occasionally by the low rumble of a distant truck engine. For truckers, this is the reality. A life spent navigating lonely stretches of road, where the monotony of the journey can lull you into a false sense of safety. But the open road holds its secrets, and sometimes those secrets are better left undiscovered. Our story begins in the heart of northern Arizona, a land of rugged landscapes and towering pine forests. It was a typical day for one seasoned truck driver, her rig gliding effortlessly along the deserted highway. Hours passed without incident, just like so many trips before. She was focused, scanning the road ahead, keeping her mind sharp for the long journey ahead. But then, in the distance, something strange caught her eye. A peculiar movement on the horizon, faint at first, barely visible through the heat haze. It wasn't a vehicle. It wasn't debris. At this distance, it looked almost like leaves blowing across the road. Harmless, perhaps. Common enough. But as she drew closer, her instincts began to prick at her. The movement wasn't random. It wasn't scattered. There was a pattern to it, something deliberate, something alive. She leaned forward in her seat, her pulse quickening, her grip tightening on the wheel. Whatever was ahead, it wasn't ordinary. She slowed her truck as the distance between her and the strange phenomenon closed. What she would discover in the next few moments would defy explanation and turn her uneventful drive into a haunting memory she would never forget. Because sometimes, out here on the road, the unexpected doesn't just surprise you. It consumes you. Northern Arizona is a land of stark contrasts. Pine forests stretch endlessly. They're tall, dark silhouettes casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. The sun hangs high, its golden rays warming the asphalt below, creating mirages that dance on the horizon. The roads here are quiet, too quiet. They wind through desolate stretches of wilderness, where the nearest sign of civilization might be hours away. It's the kind of place where a trucker's only companions are the hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of the radio. For seasoned drivers, the isolation is familiar, even comforting. The road is predictable, straight, steady, unchanging. But on this day, something broke that routine. Our trucker, a professional with years of experience behind the wheel, was cruising down one of these empty highways. It was a routine trip, one of countless others she'd made across the Southwest. The kind where the biggest challenge is fighting off the boredom. But as the truck roared along the sunlit stretch of highway, something unusual came into view. At first, it was nothing more than a faint disturbance on the horizon, a flicker of movement against the stillness of the road. It was subtle, almost easy to dismiss. Maybe it was the wind carrying debris, or perhaps a cluster of leaves tumbling across the pavement. She told herself it was nothing worth worrying about. After all, the road had always been her sanctuary, a place of routine and control. And yet, the longer she stared, the more she realized something was off. The movement wasn't scattered like debris blown by the wind. It seemed alive, purposeful. It stretched across the highway in a dense, shifting wave. Her curiosity turned to unease. She checked her mirrors, her speedometer, her surroundings. The truck was steady, the road clear, the air still. But whatever lay ahead was anything but ordinary. As the truck closed the distance, she began to make out details. The surface of the road seemed to ripple and shift, like water disturbed by an unseen force. Her grip tightened on the wheel as a strange, nagging instinct crept over her. Whatever she was approaching, It didn't belong here. It didn't belong anywhere. Before we go any further, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. If you're fascinated by true trucking horror stories and the unexplained mysteries of the road, this is the channel for you. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that will leave you questioning what's really out there. Now, let's get back to our tale. As she approached the strange movement on the horizon, the details began to sharpen. It wasn't leaves. It wasn't debris. The road itself seemed alive, writhing and shifting under the glare of the sun. Her heart raced, her instinct screaming that something wasn't right. But she couldn't stop, not here, not in the middle of nowhere. So, she pressed on, her foot hovering cautiously over the brake pedal, the truck's engine humming steadily as she closed the distance. And then she saw them, hundreds, no thousands of tarantulas, their hairy bodies moving in unison, a living carpet spilling across the asphalt. She blinked, certain her eyes were playing tricks on her, but the scene remained unchanged. It was as though the highway had been overtaken by an army of creatures, each one intent on its mysterious journey. Her first instinct was to stop, but she quickly realized there was no avoiding it. The mass of spiders stretched far beyond her line of sight, covering both sides of the road. There was no turning back, no detour, no escape. She gripped the wheel tighter, her knuckles white, and braced herself for what she had to do next. The truck's tires met the swarm with a sickening crunch. The sound was unbearable, a wet, crackling noise that seemed to echo inside the cab. Her stomach churned as she felt the truck begin to slide, the crushed bodies creating a slick, treacherous surface beneath her wheels. She fought for control, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. Where had they come from? Why were there so many? And, perhaps most chilling of all, why here? The truck lurched forward, the sound of destruction beneath her growing louder with every meter. She couldn't stop. She couldn't look away. And yet, the worst was still to come. Because sometimes, the road doesn't just take you to new places, it takes you to places you were never meant to go. The reality of what she was driving through hit her like a tidal wave. This wasn't just an unusual sight. It was something out of a nightmare. The tarantulas were everywhere, crawling, writhing, and spreading across the road like a living tide. Each one was disturbingly large, their hairy legs and bulbous bodies creating a grotesque sea of movement. But it wasn't just the sheer number of them that sent a chill down her spine, it was the sense of purpose in their movement, as if they were being drawn by something unseen. The truck's tires continued to crush the swarm with an unsettling crunch that reverberated through the cab. The sound was relentless, each rotation of the wheels amplifying the chaos beneath her. The air inside the cab felt heavier now, and a sickly smell began to seep in, a mixture of crushed bodies and something unidentifiable, something almost primal. She cranked the air vents closed, but it didn't help. It was as if the road itself was alive and had swallowed her whole. She glanced at the mirrors, hoping for a glimpse of clear pavement behind her. But what she saw instead made her stomach turn. The rear tires were coated in tarantula remains, legs, guts, and clumps of black hair caked onto the wheel wells like some macabre trophy. Her stomach churned as she realized there was no end to this swarm in sight. The truck began to slip again, the mass of crushed spiders turning the asphalt into a slick, treacherous surface. She tightened her grip on the wheel, her mind racing. If she lost control here, in the middle of nowhere, she'd be stranded in the heart of this living nightmare. But just as she thought the worst had passed, she noticed something new, a sound coming from beneath the truck, faint but distinct, a tapping, or perhaps scratching, like something trying to get inside. Her heart skipped a beat, and panic began to take hold. She knew it was impossible, yet the sound persisted, growing louder with each passing moment. She couldn't help but imagine the tarantulas crawling into the undercarriage, finding their way into the cab. She shuddered at the thought of one of them appearing in her lap or on the dashboard, its legs skittering inches from her hands. Desperate to escape, she pushed the truck forward, trying to block out the sounds, the smells, and the overwhelming sense of unease. The kilometers stretched on endlessly, the swarm showing no signs of letting up. For the first time in her career, she felt truly powerless. Out here miles from the nearest town, she was completely alone with nothing but a sea of spiders for company. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. The swarm ended, the road ahead clear once more. She exhaled, a shaky breath, her hands trembling as she loosened her grip on the wheel. But the relief was short-lived. The evidence of what she had driven through remained splattered across her truck, embedded in the tires, and burned into her memory forever. As she pulled into the truck stop, the relief of solid ground beneath her wheels was immediate, but the tension in her chest refused to ease. The truck hummed to a stop, and for the first time since she had encountered the swarm, silence settled over the cab. But it wasn't the kind of silence that brought comfort. It was the heavy, uneasy quiet of knowing that what she had just experienced was far from normal. She glanced at the side mirror and froze. The mess was worse than she had imagined. The wheel wells were caked with a thick layer of tarantula remains, legs, guts, and clumps of hair, matted together in a grotesque collage of carnage. The stench of crushed bodies still hung in the air, seeping into the truck despite her attempts to block it out. Her stomach turned, and for a moment, she considered abandoning the truck altogether. Her co-driver, who had been asleep in the back, stirred groggily. He stretched and rubbed his eyes, muttering something about needing more sleep. But as soon as she turned to him, her voice low and urgent, he knew something was wrong. "Need you to fuel up," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. He frowned, confusion flashing across his face. "It's your turn," he replied, still half asleep. "What's the big deal?" But her expression stopped him cold. "I'm not stepping outside," she said firmly, her eyes fixed on the mess smeared across the truck's exterior. He shook his head, grumbling, as he swung open the cab door and stepped outside. "You're being dramatic," he called over his shoulder. "It's just..." His voice trailed off, the words dying in his throat as he rounded the truck and saw the wheel wells. For a moment, he stood frozen, his eyes wide and his face pale. Then he took a step back, muttering a curse under his breath. The tarantula remains were undeniable, thick, slimy, and clinging to every surface the wheels had touched. Legs dangled grotesquely from the undercarriage, and streaks of black ichor smeared the mud flaps like war paint. He turned back to the cab, his expression one of disbelief mixed with. What the hell did you drive through?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. As he began fueling up the truck, he kept glancing nervously at the ground, as if expecting the swarm to reappear. For her part, she stayed inside, refusing to even crack the window. Her hands still trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, replaying the events over and over in her mind. The sound of the tarantulas crunching beneath the tires, the slick sensation of the truck sliding, the strange tapping from underneath. It was all too much. When the co-driver climbed back into the cab, his face was grim. "Whatever that was," he said, shaking his head, "I'm just glad we're out of it." She nodded, but said nothing. Deep down, she wasn't sure they were truly out of it. The experience had left a mark not just on the truck, but on her. Even as they pulled out of the truck stop and continued down the road, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching, still waiting. That night, she barely slept. Every creak of the truck, every shadow cast by the dim lights of the truck stop, felt like a reminder of what she had driven through. And though the swarm was long behind her, the memory of it stayed with her, a haunting reminder that on the open road, you never really know what you'll encounter next. What our trucker encountered that day wasn't just a random event. It was a phenomenon deeply rooted in nature, yet unsettling in its scale and impact. Tarantula migrations are rare but well-documented occurrences, particularly in regions like northern Arizona. These migrations typically happen during mating season, when male tarantulas, driven by instinct, leave their burrows in search of mates. They travel en masse, crossing highways, fields, and any obstacle in their path. But for those who witness it firsthand, the experience feels anything but natural. Imagine the sheer number of creatures moving with deliberate purpose, turning a familiar stretch of road into an otherworldly scene. It's easy to see why such events are often described as surreal or even nightmarish. For truckers, the open road is supposed to be a place of routine, a predictable environment where control is key. Encounters like this shatter that sense of control. It's not just the physical challenge of navigating a truck through an unexpected hazard. It's the psychological toll. The road, usually a source of stability, becomes a stage for the bizarre and the inexplicable. Tarantula migrations aren't the only strange phenomenon truckers face. Stories from the road are filled with accounts of unusual wildlife encounters, unexplained lights in the sky, and eerie sounds in the dead of night. Many drivers have shared tales of seeing shadowy figures at the edge of their headlights or hearing voices on deserted highways. Whether natural or supernatural, these experiences leave a mark. There's also the isolation to consider. Trucking is a solitary job, with long stretches of time spent alone in the cab, far from home and familiar comforts. This isolation can amplify the impact of strange encounters. What might be a passing curiosity for someone in a populated area becomes deeply unsettling for a trucker miles from the nearest sign of civilization. Yet, as unsettling as these experiences can be, they're also a reminder of the road's unpredictability. Every journey holds the potential for the unexpected, both beautiful and terrifying. For our trucker, the memory of that tarantula migration will likely stay with her forever, a vivid example of how the open road is never as empty or as quiet as it seems. It's moments like these that transform the mundane into the extraordinary, forcing us to confront the unknown and reminding us that, out here, the only certainty is uncertainty. The open road is vast and mysterious, filled with stories that can leave even the most seasoned truckers questioning what they've experienced. Encounters like the tarantula migration remind us that the line between the natural and the extraordinary is thinner than we think. For one driver, this journey turned from routine to unforgettable in the blink of an eye, and it's a story she'll carry with her forever. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something strange or unexplainable while traveling? What's the most unsettling thing you've seen on the road? Share your stories in the comments below. We'd love to feature your experiences in future videos. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more true trucking tales and chilling encounters, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support helps us keep these incredible stories rolling. And as you go about your day, remember this: the road holds its secrets, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. Stay safe, stay alert, And always keep your eyes on the horizon, because out there, the next story might just be yours.